Hello and welcome to the Help My Wealth podcast, Money Rules or Money Rules. Here at Help My Wealth, we are all about empowering financial success in our community of listeners. We hope you find today's topic both informative and helpful. Well, welcome to the Money Rules or Money Rules podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Logan, and today you have with me is Hamish Ferguson. Hamish has been a mortgage broker and a financial planner for 21 years, and I've asked him here today to discuss first home buyers. But before we get into that, Hamish, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And I guess, 21 years. It's been an interesting journey so far, and obviously there's been probably people out there that have been doing this longer than I have, but for me, thinking through things like, we've done the GFC, we've done the dot-com boom, we've done now COVID, which, was pretty significant, and we've done the Royal Commission, we've done all of these things. Like it's been a huge 20 years in terms of the change that's happened in the industry. So a little bit about myself, so I own Vision Property and Finance Newcastle. So we're one of 3 offices. There's one in Sydney and Orange as well. And it's a great business and group to be part of. The guys that own Sydney, I've known since I was 13 years old. So it's been a long relationship there, and it's nice working with people that you trust and that you've grown up with. So married, 5 kids over the years, and
Just 5.
Just 5. Yep. Yeah, we stopped at that point.
Good.
We thought it was enough. 4 of those kids are adults now, so been through a little bit of the parenting journey, and seem to have come out okay the other side, and just really enjoying the business now, where we've got a great group of people that we work with, and some couple of good brokers, financial planners, and other professionals as well, and I just really enjoy being part of that environment.
Yeah, and look, because we're talking first home buyers, I just wanted to ask you the question. I mean, you yourself at one point was a first home buyer. Was that easy for you? Was it hard for you? How did you find it when you had to get that all together?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. So we actually went through, it wasn't a broker at the time, it was called an originator, and it was really a guy that worked not for one of the major banks, but he worked for a non-bank lender, and basically, so he wasn't really a broker in the sense of being able to recommend different solutions, but he did still advise us and guide us and help us get into the market. That was in 2001, and obviously property prices were a little bit different back then.
Yep.
I'm glad he was there, because it was something where we just blindly followed what his guidance was at the time.
Yep.
I knew him through somebody at work and trusted her, so just made sense to trust the husband as well. And he got us in.
And I think these days, particularly personal referrals like that is probably the main way in which we actually go, I'm going to trust that advisor or that professional, having someone else to actually say that. So at the time, did you have kids, no kids, single, double income? Where were you personally at the time?
2 kids.
Yep.
They were both quite young at the time. We were renting up at Nelson Bay.
Yep.
Just doing the move around for work and try and get a few promotions under the belt before I started the business. So yeah.
So look, I think a lot of people that are listening today will be able to relate to that, which will be good. So look, let's get into the questions. What I wanted to do was ask you not so much what are the questions that first home buyers ask you, but what are the questions that first home buyers should be asking you as an advisor. So we had a look at a few, and in your experience, what are 1 or 2 ways that you could help a first home buyer prepare themselves before approaching a property sale?
So I guess the words that come to mind when I think about this is, so the first phrase I normally try and ask people in a first appointment is, are you ready? All right. So it's a big commitment. It's a commitment that you need to hold on to the property for a significant length of time.
Yes.
Mentally being used to paying bills and, knowing that you actually don't necessarily have the same flexibility to move around or do things. So all of those things there is a mental preparation and being ready to make a big decision like this. One of the biggest decisions you'll make in your life. So are you ready? All right. So the next sort of question that I sort of try to poise to people is, do you have the right knowledge? All right. So understanding all of the jargon, the way banks work, what is it that the banks are looking for, how do real estate agents work, how does a property transaction work, and the different professionals that you've got to engage in. There's a lot of education that you need to make sure that you actually are able to see it through well. All right.
Yeah, and look, I don't know about you, but when I was at school, there was no course on how to buy a first home, how to go for a loan, how to look or search for property. And it's funny because it really is, for the average person, the largest asset they're probably ever going to own. And yet, we just sort of assume that it's just natural, thoughts that you'll just be able to work it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people go in blind and have to do that research for themselves. So having an advisor to walk alongside of is actually, from my point of view, really important. And it was very helpful for me when I went through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the third, there is a third one that I think is quite important, which is, learning, how important it is to be able to tell your story correctly to the bank, right? So making sure that you've thought through what savings looks like, that you've got your income set up properly, that you've got a budget that you can save consistently. All of those things lead to success.
Yep.
So those three things.
Okay. Look, the next question that we looked at was, what are your thoughts on entering into a property sale with less than 10% of the initial investment? So 10% deposit. That's a question that comes up all the time when I talk to people. People are often saying, should I go for less? Should I go for more? Mortgage insurance, 20%, 10%, really low loans.
Yeah, look, I think for me, when I think this through, it's looking at the alternatives, all right, as much as it is saying I've got a low deposit. So one of the downsides of buying with a low deposit is that you don't have a lot of equity for that first couple of years, and so you really need to watch your P's and Q's. Make the loan repayments, make sure you've done things right, accelerate through, get the equity as quickly as you can. All right. So in those first couple of years, it's almost like you're on probation, with the bank and the property market and everything, that you really need things to come together well.
You need to get that 20% in there, even if you only started with a lower amount.
Correct. All right. So because it's just a safety margin. It's the more equity you've got, the more you can roll with the bumps and bruises along the way. Yeah. All right. But the alternative is, if you don't buy, then one of the things I quite often say to people is, are you going to be able to save quicker than property prices go up?
Yes.
All right. So it's fine to wait, but if waiting a year means that $500,000 place has gone up to $525,000, and I've only been able to save $15,000 in that time frame, then the market's gotten further away from me.
And in recent times, it's gone even further than that, hasn't it?
Correct.
I have actually known personally a few people who were trying to get to the 20% so they didn't have to pay their mortgage insurance. But in doing so, they've actually now been priced out of the market. They actually have to now save a substantial amount more because housing prices have gone up so much.
Absolutely, and it's always one of those things. It's very difficult to time the market. So people will sometimes say, "Hey, I might wait till prices come down," right? And look, it's not that you can't do that. It's just that most people will wake up in a year or two and realise that strategy just didn't work for them, because property, it's rare that it goes back considerably.
Yeah, I always say to people, because that's a question I get asked a lot, and I always say to people, there will be a dip. Property rises and then property flattens out, and then it will rise again in 5 or 10 years' time, and there will be a dip somewhere, but you probably won't know it until you look back, and it'll be in a year's time that you look back and you'll say, "Oh, there was the dip," in July, August, September of whatever year. But until you can do that, it's actually not possible to predict that dip, really. So am I hearing you correct in saying that if you can get 20%, great, that's what the banks want, it's a good buffer, that's where you need to be. But if you can't get to the 20%, then really get good advice on whether or not it's actually worth going for a lower interest, a lower amount for your deposit?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, one little thing to conclude on that is that, it's not just about 20% or 5%, right? So the more deposit you've got, the more, the stronger your position,
Yep.
the lower the mortgage insurance premium,
Yes.
and the easier it is to get in.
Yes. So, Hamish, the third question that we looked up was, what are the supporting guidelines that you can offer towards an aspirational investor for his future investment plans?
So, what's interesting is, we all go through, well, most of us will go through these stages. We're young and single, and then, maybe we get married or find a partner, and then we have kids, and during all of that time, you don't have to get everything done straight away. All right. So for example, the person that's, double income, no kids, they might have the capacity to buy 3 properties, but they might not be able to hold on to those properties when they decide to start a family. So just going and buying 3 properties isn't necessarily the best outcome unless they've really thought through those later years and how they're going to manage that time. So what I'm trying to say is that you have to pace yourself. So, that bit of analogy that says, buy, consolidate, and then get ready for the next one. And knowing that in between each one might be a while, it could be 3 or 4 or 5 years. So, but don't necessarily feel like you've got to do it all yesterday or do it really quickly, that you can space things out.
And have you, had someone personally that has stacked up their investments in such a way with their first home and second and third that it actually, that they didn't have the liquidity to be able to pay the repayments when things got hard, when interest rates went up or when circumstances changed, like having children, and they had to sell in a non-opportune time?
Absolutely. And it's actually quite common, and I don't know if it's common across the world, but it is common in Australia to find people that are asset rich and cash flow poor.
Yes.
And the problem is in that situation is the only way to get out of it, right, is either to hold on, which can be quite uncomfortable, or to sell something when you might not want to.
Yes. And when it comes to professional advice, if someone comes to you and actually can say, look, this is my income, this is where my asset classes are, this is what I earn, are you able to sit down and give them a plan of attack moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, a real life example that we've been working with at the moment is a couple that just bought their first investment property, and they started off with the goal saying, hey, we'd really like to buy a second property within 2 years. So we then stepped through with them what they would need to do to be able to get into a position where they could buy that second property within 2 years. And, what's been really nice about that is that the couple's actually come back and said, actually, life's more important, the stage of life we're in right now. We've now realised that 2 years probably isn't achievable for us because there's other things we want to do that aren't just about, accumulating wealth. And so for them, it's actually helped them to, I guess, reevaluate and come up with some more valuable goals for themselves that actually mean more to them.
Yeah.
So the other thing about an investment strategy is being deliberate in, what you're trying to buy and being able to visualize how it's going to pan out in the long run. So thinking through, not just capital growth, but yield, what I might be able to do to improve the property. Sometimes one property can actually be better than 2 separate properties if you buy the right property that has the right potential.
Yeah. And I know that for some people I've spoken to, doing things like being able to put a granny flat on or being able to do an infill and putting a small home and subdividing, there's lots of ways where a professional advisor can actually help you to be able to really push forward on that investment.
And sometimes the professional advisor, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, is it's more about helping you steer away from the lemons than to find the gold.
Yes.
It requires patience, it requires processes and rules and discipline in how you do things.
Yeah, and I've often said to people, look, going to a mortgage broker or a financial planner or a property advisor, there's a cost involved in that, but compared to the cost of a $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 property, it's a minute amount of money. but it's amazing how often people will try and do things themselves and end up with larger costs later on because they didn't get the right advice, or they didn't get the right mortgage, or they didn't get the right,
Oh, absolutely. And as you and I have discussed in the past, as a mortgage broker, we're not licensed to advise on real estate, all right? So, but what I do find interesting is that if somebody came to me as a financial planner and said, Hamish, I've got $200,000, help me know where to invest it. Well, they'd want to know that there's this really sound research that goes behind where they're going to put their money.
Yes.
Right? Yet people will continually just check out realestate.com or Domain to find a property, yet the property's 3 times the value of the shares portfolio, but they don't even think to get professional advice, right, to actually go down that path. So, and that sort of comes back to that education piece, isn't it? That, people just need to be challenged or probably pushed a little bit to say, all right, let's talk about what the rules are here or what the process that you're following is to hopefully get the right result.
Yeah, and look, at Money Rules, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to introduce people to the idea that there are rules in life, and I think a lot of people don't even know or are aware of what those rules are. And so therefore they're playing the same game as other people, but because of that, they do find themselves, in hard situations. Whereas if you just had a little bit of advice or you just understood the rules in certain ways, then that wouldn't be a problem for you.
Okay. That's actually really interesting because, when I heard money rules, I initially thought to myself, so you're actually trying to spruik money and you're saying money rules as in, money's king, so it's not just about that.
Well, look, the title could be taken many different ways and it's, it's been designed specifically for that. But look, I find that if you don't put in place the right money rules, you're going to be in money troubles, aren't you? So if you want to get to a point where money rules and it's doing really well for you and you're, you've got independence and you're financially free, then you better work out what the rules are for money and go from there.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, look, Hamish, thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate your time. And we look forward to having you back next time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. The information discussed by the Help My Wealth and the Money Rules podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only and is general in nature, and it is not advice. It is not intended as a substitute for professional finance, legal or tax advice. It is aimed to provide a general understanding of each topic and should not be relied upon to make an investment or financial decision. It is strongly suggested that you seek professional advice regarding your own individual circumstances before making a financial decision. Help My Wealth and the hosts of the Money Rules podcast are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from a podcast. In the spirit of reconciliation, Help My Wealth and the Money Rules podcasts acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to past, present and emerging elders. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.